Project B can possibly outpace the WNBA.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm Clea Butler. Joined alongside me is Sophia Jones. It's an exciting day. It's the weekend. We get to talk about more women's basketball. Life couldn't be much better than this. We're going to get into what we saw from week one of college basketball. A pretty solid game between Texas and Richmond yesterday. But first, we're going to jump into Project B. Now, Sophia, we've talked about this before. Every time we say something on the show, all of a sudden thousands of more information pops up. But before we jump into that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. So as I was saying, every time we bring something up on the show, it seems like just hours or literally minutes after I press post, it's like, boom, new article, new information. So we're back to cover more on Project B. It plans to debut with 6 teams of 11 players that will play 7 two-week tournaments across Asia, Europe, and Latin America. One of the bigger pieces of information that stood out to me after our initial time bringing it up, they said that they were going to have higher salaries than the WNBA and then unrivaled, but they didn't put a firm number on it just yet. Right now, they're saying that the 7-figure salaries can be worth up to $2 million or higher, with some multi-year deals even crossing the 8-figure threshold. And when we're looking back at what Nneka Ogwumike said, that was the biggest part in her signing, was the amount of money that they would be able to receive. And if you're looking at those numbers and if you're comparing that to what some of the, let's just say, the rookie salary within the WNBA, right? If you're comparing getting paid $2 million to $60K, or Nneka's one of the higher paying players, she's still making around the $200,000 mark. $200,000 to $2 million. I can see why she wanted to sign with them.
I mean, it's not that complicated of like, oh, more money, yeah, go in that direction, maybe. But when you look at the current WNBA Supermax with this current CBA is $249,244. The WNBA players are right now trying to fight for more. They're trying to get that Supermax close to $1 million, which even if they are thinking optimistically and are able to achieve that $1 million, it still doesn't really compare too much to that 2 million salary, as well as some potentially going into 8-figure salaries in that Project B league. And another huge amount or huge piece of information for these players just in their potential to earn money, similarly to Unrivaled, players will receive an equity stake in the Project B league. So that's like another huge piece of just enticement for these players to be attracted to Project B.
Yeah, and that's a really good point that you bring up too, because when you include the salary plus equity, now they're treating players as more of stakeholders, not just athletes. So they have a little bit more of a sense of they are part of this. They're not only just playing, but they are part of the money aspect of it. And again, that's literally what all they're asking for, is to get paid more. I think there's a lot of positives that we've seen so far. Another big mention that has come out of late. Last episode, we said that this was Saudi backed. Now they are saying they are not. Saudi Arabia is not a financial backer, and that they denied being funded by Saudi Arabia in any way. But Sophia, I know you have a little bit more of a deep dive on this in terms of what the Saudi Arabia connection looks like.
So, Project B's co founder, Grady Burnett, a former Facebook executive, like you said, mentioned that Saudi Arabia is not a financial backer. However, there is still a connection because Sela, a subsidiary of the Saudi Public Investment Fund, is an event partner of the league. And Project B as a whole, they've said that they want to diversify where their investments are coming from. So it sounds like that company and that connection to Saudi Arabia is just one of the ways that they're getting funded, along with their investment companies and investment groups, which include Candace Parker, Novak Djokovic, Sloane Stevens.
There seems to be a lot of positives to this, also some negatives and a little bit of a gray area. I would constitute that as maybe the gray area of this, and however people may feel about that. But another interesting point that hasn't been brought up just yet, obviously this is still kind of coming to fruition, but we don't know what the broadcast would look like. I'm very curious what those TV packages are going to look like. We mentioned Unrivaled obviously is on TNT. WNBA had expanded their platforms this season. We know some of those games are supposed to be reaching Amazon Prime next year, but we don't know what this TV package would look like. EuroLeague, as you had mentioned too, you can watch that on YouTube TV, very accessible. I don't know how accessible they would want to make this. Do they obviously want to have an even larger media rights deal to get more money out of this? Or do they want it to be easily accessible so they can create a new fan base and then kind of switch it up from there? I mean, we've seen the NBA, I think for the NBA to watch all the NBA games this season, you have to pay nearly $1,000 in subscription fees. I don't think they would want to do that right away, especially for a new league. But that's also a big question on how they're going to present this, how they're going to show this to people.
Yeah, because especially when you're considering the format of this league where they're playing 7 2-week tournaments internationally, that's not something that me as someone living in San Francisco, I can be like, oh, I want to see the Valkyries, so I'm gonna go to Chase Center. It's not like that. There won't be many opportunities for people to go and to these events in person. So I think that their broadcast is going to be a huge point of emphasis, but it's going to have to be extremely accessible, which I am interested to see how that works out. They're already following a model similar to F1 and tennis. And I know for tennis, at least, they have a deal with ESPN where all the Grand Slams are presented on that platform just across and they send a team out there just to do coverage of the games. I would imagine it looks something like that. Don't know if it will be with ESPN because this project be lasting from November to April will coincide with a lot of other sports going on, like an NFL or NBA. So the broadcast will be interesting, but like I love watching EuroLeague games on just YouTube. You go to their channel, pull it up, and it's there for free. So listen, the same way that these players are trying to get more money, I'm trying to save mine.
Listen, we love for the free. And we obviously want to watch good basketball for free. But the reality of that, we don't know just yet. But there's also larger implications to this when it comes to the WNBA, other international leagues. You kind of hinted at it, what it's going to look like across other basketball, like WNBA, EuroLeague, really WNBA. I'm so curious to see to see how they are going to counteract this, because I know Kathy Engelbert has to be stressed at this point. There is no way that you are seeing players, having developmental pools in Unrivaled now, creating more money, having more funding. Now you have players that are going to Project B, and this is becoming a new thing. It's like, this is stressful for them, I'm sure, across the board. But it also really raises the question now that they push this 30-day extension back. And honestly, I think the 30-day extension worked in the player's favor right now, considering what we're seeing come up within these 30 days. Now it's more of what the WNBA is going to respond with, because if you have players that have the opportunity to maybe make $2 million, obviously Unrivaled, they're all making a minimum of $200,000. You can't go back to the WNBA and the max that they're giving is still below $1 million. It's going to be hard to, and you're losing such a large fan base and a fan base that's in the United States that, as you mentioned, can physically go watch these games. Not everyone can necessarily go to Unrivaled and be in Miami and watch those games. Not everyone can go overseas and watch these games. And obviously, if it's an F1 format, it wouldn't be here very often. So the WNBA has to come up with something so that people can come to the games within the US, because if there's a player walkout, it's going to get real wicked.
And that's a great way to put it. I think that this news not only puts pressure on the WNBA to increase those salaries, but also look at those prioritization rules. One of the most evident cases of prioritization is when Diana Taurasi skipped the 2015 WNBA season to rest after playing for a Russian team in the offseason. And that club paid her more than her $107,000 WNBA salary to sit out, and she made 1.5 million instead. So you're going to have more of these players that are looking at that and just maybe potentially opting to play overseas, similar to a Emma Miesemann or Gabby Williams, who have opted again to play overseas in EuroLeague for their home countries instead of in the W. So like I said, I think this news puts a lot of pressure on the league to start really figuring some things out before that November 30th extension CBA deadline.
Yes, they said, I got to put me first, and I understand. Coming up, we're going to go over that Richmond and Texas game, and Texas is looking pretty strong to start the season. The NBA season is heating up, and DoorDash has found the perfect way to keep fans in their bag all season long. Whether you're watching for the highlights, your fantasy team, or just your favorite player, DoorDash makes every game night even better. DoorDash is the official on-demand delivery platform of the NBA, and they're celebrating with something called the Bag Drop. We're talking player inspired drip, exclusive gear, and stuff you'll actually want. I love that it's not just food. You can get everything from snacks and drinks to headphones, ice, even socks, all delivered. DoorDash has you covered for late night highlights, last minute watch parties, and double OT fuel ups. So next time someone goes off for 50, use promo code NBA50 the next day to get 50% off on DoorDash with Dash Pass, plus your shot at the bag drop. Dash Pass members only. 50% off up to $10 the day after a 50-point game with promo code. Terms apply. No purchase necessary. Ends April 13th. Open to U.S. residents 21 or older. Visit DoorDashInYourBag.com for full details. DoorDash, in your bag all season long. Well, Texas was definitely deep in their bag in their win over Richmond, 85-56. Madison Booker coming out hot again, 22 points, 12 rebounds, 6 steals. But what I've loved so much about Texas is that we're seeing a balanced attack. You have that star and Madison Booker, but she's not the only one that's able to produce.
Definitely. I've been impressed with Aaliyah Crump to start this season so far. The freshman is a starter on that team. She had 14 points last night. She had a really good performance in their first game of the season, but she's going to be a huge piece for that Texas team, not only to be successful now, but in the future. And Texas just really continues to dominate the paint as well. They shot 55% from field goals because they're getting so many of those high percentage shots around the rim. And of course, a couple of those Madison Booker mid ranges, because even though there's a hand of her face and she's fading away, that is a high percentage shot for her as well. Not as high volume from the 3-point line. They're only shot 12, but they're 4 of 12, so 33%. But Texas just really is so physical and dominant inside the interior on both ends of the floor.
In the interior for Texas, you got to watch out for the big girl because that is where they're getting most of their production right now. And even though they're not shooting overly well from three, they went 4 of 12, so 33%. They don't put up a lot of threes in a game, but when you're working the interior like that, you're in a pretty good space. But what I love so far about them as well is their defense. They were able to convert 24 of Richmond's turnovers into 26 points. You can tell they just kind of overwhelmed Richmond sort of from the beginning. I did feel like Richmond would maybe put up a little bit more of a fight against Texas, but Texas looks really impressive this season. I'm not shocked, but I feel like they've made great improvements even from last year.
I agree. And when you're looking at the state of this Texas team and where they stand in the SEC, looking at the top five just in the country, number two is South Carolina, number four is Texas, number five is LSU. So those teams are going to scrape and claw their way to that SEC championship. But I really think that the way that Texas has started out this year, they have a really good chance of giving South Carolina a run for their money for that SEC championship because they just have, like you said, such a balanced team.
And I think we saw obviously last season with UConn beating South Carolina. South Carolina is a beatable team. I feel like for the, obviously the past couple of years and with their championships, that it just seemed like nobody could get past them. It was always just they would blow you out. It was just like something you had to accept. South Carolina is a beatable team, and truthfully, I think Texas can give them a run for their money. And when you talk about all those top teams that are in the SEC, I cannot wait for conference play. These are going to be such fun games to watch, but we also have to give some credit to Richmond as well, especially Maddie Dugan, a player that we mentioned in our last podcast. 22 points, 7 rebounds. She's a really strong player, and she really put the team on her back to put up a good fight. And if you're putting up 22 points against a really tough Texas defense, they're going to look really good within their own conference.
Within their own conference, and I think still looking like one of the best mid-majors in the country still. I think you look at that number 24 ranking and how much they lost to Texas by. And you can, some people might think that that is not necessarily deserving, but looking at the way that they played on the court, they had really great offensive pace. Texas was just so physical and blew up a lot of their actions. But it's one of those things where you can still tell that the team has all the necessary tools to succeed. I think it was unfortunate for them that Richmond lost their starting guard, Alicia Newell, midway through the first quarter because she suffered a broken nose and concussion. So she'll probably be out for a bit, which is unfortunate for Richmond, especially when you're trying to develop chemistry early on in the season. But like I said, that's a piece that potentially why they lost to Texas by so much. But Richmond's still looking very solid.
Yeah, I think their performance is encouraging nonetheless. Obviously, work still remains. They obviously have to just kind of control those turnovers, especially. But you just mentioned when you have a starter out like that, you're also taking away another ball handler. So they'll be able to figure it out. And once they get into their conference play, as you mentioned, they're still going to be one of the top mid-major teams. But we're going to talk to you about the takeaways we have from week 1. We got to see a lot of teams: UCLA, South Carolina, UConn, Texas. These are all teams we're going to be talking about for the remainder of the season. So stay tuned.
The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to fanduel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Okay, our week one of college basketball takeaways. One takeaway so far is the overall depth that we have seen from a lot of these teams. Some top teams that come to mind are UCLA, South Carolina, UConn, Texas, even in Notre Dame. But those are just to name a few. I think early on, we have seen that these teams not only need their star power, but their bench is carrying a lot of strength as well. And, as we get through the season, and as unfortunate it is to say it, obviously injuries come about for a lot of teams. Seeing that these programs have a lot of depth early on and can rely on other options is promising once we see, those postseason pushes and getting into March Madness, not to get ahead of myself. But it's good to see these programs have the depth, especially when some of these programs have also had some key players leave, either transfer, go to the WNBA, but they've been able to bounce back quickly, especially with the assistance of the transfer portal.
Yeah, I think especially when you are looking at those top four teams with UConn, South Carolina, UCLA, and Texas, it's so much of their depth. Out of that group, I would say UConn even is the deepest.
Hmm.
I know, shock, surprise, but
Oh my gosh, really?
I know. But like just for UConn's ability to have anyone sub in and there really is not any kind of drop off is huge, just to develop chemistry and to make sure that everyone is on the same page. So I think UConn is the best example. We just talked about Texas and how deep they go, but even South Carolina, I think that their first two games they were against Grand Canyon and then Bowling Green, so not a Power Four school team, but that gives them the opportunity, especially with their injuries, like you mentioned, between Chloe Kitts and Ashlyn Watkins. It gives them an opportunity against these teams to just figure out their identity, get some things together on offense, especially when you have new transfers coming in. So I think that those two teams are just so incredibly deep. But for a team that I think you look at a opposite example would be like a Notre Dame, because years prior they did have that depth between Sonia Citron and Olivia Miles. But this year it feels like Notre Dame's ceiling is going to be reliant on how well Hannah Hidalgo performs. Even in that opening 98-52 win against FDU, like big gap right there. But the starters all played 33 plus minutes. Kelly Radigan was the leader off the bench, but she still only played 19 minutes. And then they played three more, so 9 deep in total. But those other three players played 2, 3, and 4 minutes. And when you have a blowout situation like that, I would think that you want to go deeper into your bench,
Hmm.
but Notre Dame just doesn't really seem to have as much this year. And like I said, it's just going to be a lot reliant on Hannah Hidalgo, which she's a great player, a great two-way player that you can put a lot of pressure on her shoulders. But like I said, it's really going to depend on her how far they go.
Yeah, and they're a good example of a that had key players leave. We all know Olivia Miles transferred. Sonia Citron was a really big part of their offensive production. She's clearly in the WNBA now. So you take away two All-American level players, and what you're left with right now is Hannah Hidalgo, who has been able to produce, but as you mentioned, this team might have to rely heavily. I actually have some hope in Notre Dame, but they are going to have to rely heavily on her production on both sides of the floor. We know how intense of a defender she is, and she loves defense. She's made that very clear, and it really fuels her offensive production and even just creating opportunities for other players on her team. But she's also a veteran for this team now too, and I think that's going to be one of the most important tests for her this season. It's you can only lead as far as other people follow you. If nobody on the team is really rallying behind her, and not to get controversial, we don't necessarily know what the beef or non-beef was between her and Olivia Miles. We don't know how that might look or translate with the rest of her team if they can't rally behind her, or if she's not necessarily a player that they want to rally behind. It's going to be difficult for them to get into a solid flow this year.
Exactly. I think Vanessa De Jesus was a great addition. Getting her from the transfer portal, I think, does help in that backcourt and add a little bit to that depth. But just like you said with Hannah Hidalgo, it's gonna she's a great two-way player, but you can only do so much as one person.
Mhm.
But at the same time, to give Notre Dame the benefit of the doubt, if you have enough players surrounding a star, I guess you can say, that just really become engrossed in their role and execute their roles to the highest ability, you can have a very successful team at the same time. If your job is to box out and rebound, then you better be the best boxer, outer, and rebounder in the country. Stuff like that, you know? So I would still agree with you with hope for Notre Dame just because that star power with Hidalgo is so high and they do have solid role players. I just am a little concerned about the depth because last season they underperformed, I think you could say, because they started out with really high expectations and then continued to just drop in the rankings throughout the course, but it was because of injuries. And so you would hope that they don't repeat that same fate this year.
Yeah, some other good takeaways. Malaysia Fulwiley looks like the transfer to LSU seems like a good fit for her so far. You've mentioned it before. She's a little bit more of a flashy player. She can get down and get a bucket, and that just fits in LSU system really well.
Exactly. And I think her defense has been really aggressive to start this season out as well. She is coming off the bench still, so I wonder if that is going to be her role for this season or if she will be able to make that jump to the starters. But looking at the type of player that she is, I think that coming off the bench isn't even that terrible of a thing because she provides such a spark and so much energy. LSU hasn't really faced intense competition this non-conference season so far, and I don't think they will until they play Duke in a couple weeks. The LSU usually has weaker non-conference schedules so they can build chemistry, but it's a great chance for Fulwali to cement her role. But like you said, she's been really fun to watch so far this season, and I think that LSU just really fits her style of play.
Yeah, another notable team to mention is Tennessee when we're looking at some of these SEC schools in particular. I think they've gotten maybe more hate or criticism than necessary in their loss to NC State. I think people need to remember NC State is a very tough program. Obviously, they were ranked essentially right next to each other, and it wasn't a blowout loss. It was 80-77, but a lot of it came down to some of that last minute game execution. But you talk about it a lot as well. The 5 in, 5 out is really interesting. And I don't know, I'm not a coach. I don't know if I love it though, just because they're trying to withstand that press the entirety of the game, which I understand, but the 5 in, 5 out can be difficult for a player who has the hot hand at the moment. You're losing some production in certain areas when you're asking all 5 of your players that were just in together to get out, switch it up. It's an interesting tactic, and obviously it has worked, and that's just the system that they run by. But I just don't know if I love that in their game against NC State.
Yeah, just to your point, whenever there is a hot hand of sort and your rhythm is being broken up because you're having to play both sides of the ball so much and you're getting subbed out because of that and picking up full court, it can limit your production a little bit. But I think that's also a question of if players want to, like, they like, it's so cliche, but like if they want to be individual or team based, which honestly sometimes you gotta be a little selfish if you do want the team to win. So I can understand that. But like you said, I think people were overreacting that Tennessee lost.
For sure.
Like, I hate when people say, oh my gosh, it's an upset. It was the number 9 team beating the number 18, and those were based off of preseason polls.
Yeah.
Like,
And
it's
it was
really
like
not.
8/9. Like it was basically the same ranking.
Exactly. So I think that Tennessee, not too much to be worried about, and just with losing Ruby so, or 2 days before that game as well, when she was dismissed from the team, that's a little bit of a shakeup, and the players need to, if they had any types of offensive or defensive schemes that involved her a lot, that's more things that you have to consider just revising. So I think Tennessee will still be in a good shape, but SEC is looking so competitive. They're really going to want to make sure that they get it together before they come face to face with the South Carolina, Texas, and LSU teams.
Yeah, and then a last team that I want to bring up is Iowa State. I think the Cyclones are looking good behind Audie Crooks. There's been a clear difference between their non-conference last year compared to this year. They're looking like they're starting a lot stronger. Last season, they had some really tough losses. They began ranked at 8, and then they lost to Northern Iowa, South Carolina, Iowa, and their rankings just kept going down. And they also lost to UConn, so dropped them out of the top 25. But Audie Crooks is a force to be reckoned with. And we talk about, we haven't gotten too far into her, but the transfer of Jada Williams, too, who's been putting up about 13 points. She's really good at facilitating. I think once they get into a good groove with each other, that they can be really strong this season.
Definitely. Especially even with Jada Williams, whenever you can have a guard post connection, that is so dangerous. And I think that as once they continue to develop that chemistry as this season progresses, especially with a player like Audie Crooks who can just dominate that area of the game, Iowa State, like you said, I think they're looking strong and they'll be able to make a run in the Big 12 because I think that's a pretty open conference, honestly.
I agree with you. But there's plenty of more basketball to be watched, and we will be back to talk to you and walk you through all of it. Thank you so much for watching Locked On Women's Basketball. We'll be back on Monday.